Good morning, everybody. So now you know we're Disney geeks and Springsteen geeks. The boss. So today we're going to do that was our brief introduction. We're going to give you some background on our early warning system that's called Student Explorer. So I'm going to do that. Then we're going to tag team off to Glenn, who's going to talk to you a little bit of our technical journey with the Canvas APIs and how that relates to Student Explorer. And then we'll finish up with some follow-up and question time. So here we go. I want to quickly acknowledge our team. So it is a large team that brings together both the scholarship. Oh, that's getting really loud. Or sounds loud to me. But it's a large team that brings together both the scholarship and design of our early warning system, as well as our partners and ITS, as well as the LSNA management information system that helps the current version. So I'm going to set our context. So our early warning system is designed in partnership and for academic advisors on campus. They're really our intermediaries between students and instructors and really helping students navigate how am I doing in my classes, what classes should I select, how am I doing in my pathway, and really what's going on. And what our problem space is that advisors came to us and said, right now we're really relying on students that A, just come to us, we're very reactionary, and B, we're relying on student-reported data. We don't have a window into how students are doing formatively in their courses right now as they're progressing through the classes. And we only really know either from an instructor how they're doing at the midpoint, which is often very late in the term, from a kind of a midpoint alert system that instructors can send, or at the end of the term, which is then we only know final grades. So can we kind of do this developmental or intrusive advising pattern where actually instead of being more reactive, we're proactive and actually able to leverage the data to actually say which students should we target and actually bring in or leverage all the different resources we have in an institution like Michigan and actually direct them to the most appropriate places. So an early warning system is the idea that can we leverage historical and current formative data in near real time. We're not using necessarily real time. We're trying to get as recent as last night at least, in which students might be at risk of academic jeopardy. And the idea is to leverage actionable intelligence. The idea of analytics is really saying what is actionable data. It's not just kind of here's historical patterns. We know these students kind of have problems in the past. It's really saying that even though we know a lot of historical information about you, maybe this term, generally you're an A student, but something's going on, you're just kind of depressed, or maybe the football teams keep losing again, so that's affecting your academic standing. So it really was actionable in that data that we can act on. So Student Explorer, and as I already mentioned, we've really worked on this as a partnership with academic advisors. We talk about the kind of research we do in our lab as design-based research. Where design-based research is not, we're going to go design a tool, kind of deliver it to you, and kind of do pre-post how to affect. We're actually going to iterate on it with you as a partner. So we actually worked with a group of academic advisors and then multiple groups over time. And really saying, what data do you need in your job? How can we best design that and deliver it to you? And how does that actually affect your work to actually make your work move towards this idea of intrusive or developmental advising? And you can see we've grown over time. So we started with this small group of advisors back in winter 2011. They're a group, they're called M-STEM Academies, or this is a group in engineering called Engine, where they're a targeted group that's sort of looking at kind of at-risk engineering students, and then growing that over time. You can see this last year we actually expanded out to EAC as our Engineering Advising Center. They advise all first-year engineering students. So now we're serving around 50 advisors and around 4,500 students in a given term. So our data structure is we were starting with what was most common across courses at U of M. So if you think about least common denominators, what is most common? Because there is a lot of predictive power and a lot of early warning systems with things like forums or chat messages or more interactive tools. The problem is that if you look across courses, those are not very common, and only like 3 to 5% of courses use those interactive tools. But most courses have grades. They're using the gradebook, especially those large intro-level courses. A lot of them have to use the gradebook because that's the only way to manage when you have 2,000 students taking intro stats. And every course has a login. So looking across learning management systems, there's always a login to that. So login is kind of our proxy for effort in this model. And we start with the data structure to support Sakai. We are a Sakai institution. We've had Sakai running since 2004. And now with us piloting and kind of moving towards Canvas, we now need to adapt that structure for additional data sources like Canvas and other local tools as well as we kind of map this out and grow over time. So, wow, comes out really dark. So all our slides are on the Jive or the forum, so you can download our slides. But this is really a quick categorization scheme. I'm not going to walk all the way through this because, A, it's dark for some reason on this monitor, and you guys will have the slides. But it is a categorization scheme. It's not necessarily a predictive model. We obviously built this scheme with the help of advisors over time using predictive models. But again, as I said, because we're already in an at-risk group, we wanted to, that's where we started, we wanted to kind of just say, regardless of prediction, how are you doing this term? Maybe you're having the term of your life. Maybe you're still struggling, depending on the context. And all this is bounded within a specific course. So it is within the context of this one physics class or this one engineering class. It's not overall. So within that engineering class, do you have all the points? Or are you now using Canvas data? It's actually using the weighted percentage. If you're doing fine, you're at 85 or above, you're good. If you're kind of in this middle space, then we'll compare you with the course average. That's this kind of step 2. So if you're within, if you have a 65, that 65% is a lot different if the class average is at 85 versus 75. So that's the next rule. Then we look at the course percentile ranking. So if you're right on the border between this kind of green and yellow or between yellow and red, then we'll look at rank percentile of login. And if you are at least logging in at 25th rank percentile and you're kind of chugging along, at least checking in at the same rate your peers are, and again, that's ranked with everyone else. So if the instructor is kind of keeping things up to date within that site and there's a lot going on and people are logging in once a day or more than once a day, are you logging at the same rate versus no one's putting stuff in that LMS site? So once a week, it's fine to check in or less. So are you checking in at the same rate? Or if you dropped off the face of the planet? If you've dropped off of the face of the planet, we'll push you down into the category. And you see these labels have we call this our E3 status because it's really the action we want the advisor to take. We want you as an advisor to say, if something's really not going well, engage that student. Something's in this middle space, we're not sure what's going on, explore. But because we also want to say, we actually want to keep, if students are doing well, we don't want to just say ignore them. We actually want to say, keep doing what you're doing awesome, don't let up. We want you to encourage that student. So this is what our system looks like, and I'm going to run through this really quickly because these are quick talks. This is our summary screen. So you can see here, I can select a student. This is where they're going. Those E3 alerts come through these little boxes here. The numbers mean the number of courses the student has in that status. So this student that we're looking at right here is actually going to have 2 in the Explorer or yellow box. It's a little orange here. They're going to have 1 over here in red and 1 also in Encourage or green. So they'll show up in all 3 of those boxes. And then here's a quick summary. We are Michigan. We like our maize and blue, hence my shirt today. So hence the bars up there. So you can kind of quickly see where's the student compared with the class. So the student's in blue, the course is in yellow. So you can kind of see right here, this Psych 111 is kind of where that red status comes from. There's kind of big gap there. And I might click on that and say, okay, what's really driving this? So the difference between our early warning system and maybe some others that you may have seen out in the field is that we're showing you lots of numbers. Because this is geared towards academic advisors. And the whole idea is, can they have a conversation with students either before or during a meeting? So I can actually show this to Glenn, say, Glenn, what's going on in your psych class? So, let's click in. Let's really look at this. Actually, this is English. But I can say, well, it looks like, you had some early trouble early on, you kind of cut up a little bit, and then something's going on. The class is up here. Are you having struggle? Maybe it's time to go to the writing center, maybe have further discussion. I'm seeing some zeros here, Glenn. Did you forget to turn in some stuff? I don't know. Let's talk. You can kind of see the login pattern over time. So sometimes there's a lot of login versus less login. So really, there's a lot of information here where I can start to have a meaningful conversation with students and say, really, what's going on? How can I best assist you and direct you to the right resources so you can be successful and get what your goals are in this class? We also have qualitative feedback. So if there are comments provided within the learning management system that kind of explain more. So not only did you you had a decent response paper, but maybe, your spelling and your verb agreement aren't so high. Can we start to remediate on that as well and start to say, why did you get 40 out of 50 on this paper or this exam? There might be some qualitative aspects of that as well. So that's kind of the general overview. I'm going to hand this off to Glenn now. He's going to talk more about what we did with the APIs. Away we go.
All right, so I will try to keep the technical bits a little bit light, but before I start, show of hands, how many people were at the keynote this morning? How many people are freaked out by the whole trees are out to get us thing? Yeah, pretty scary. All right, so we need lots of data to drive a system like this, right? And so this information needs to be trustworthy and reliable. Advisors are taking actions with students based on this. We've got to have good data to support this kind of system. And so as Steve mentioned, we are a Sakai institution, or we have been since 2004. And so Michigan was a contributing member of Sakai, or a founding contributor of Sakai. And so we've got really deep knowledge of that system. Canvas, not so much. So let's back up a year ago. June of 2014, Michigan, along with several other universities, announced Unizin, and Michigan internally also decided to adopt Canvas as a pilot program to move to Canvas as an LMS for the university. And so the decision was to have some of the classes start moving out of Sakai into Canvas for the fall term. So we're in June. September is the fall semester, and we need to go from integrating data from a system that we have really deep knowledge of, we have control of the data and it's on premise, to something where it's in the cloud, we don't have control of the data, and we really know nothing about it. So very short time window. We actually didn't start the work until August. It took some time to get projects approved and resources freed up from other assignments. So we started in August. Now we're down to a month. Long story short, we did not make it by September. But we did make it by November. And had we started in June, we would have made it by the beginning of the fall term. So by November, we had 20 courses that we were integrating in with our data warehouse, the Student Explorer. And at the same time, we were prepared for winter term of 2015, where we had roughly 100 courses. And we put ourselves in a position where when fall of 2015 comes around, we can deal with 500 or 1,000 courses. So in a very short time, I guess the takeaway here is very short time, the API set allows some clean integrations without having deep knowledge of the system prior to going into it. All right, so if you Google Canvas API, the first search result you'll get is the URL that's up here, which takes you to a documentation of the complete API set. So Canvas has delivered, comes with 74 different APIs. I've got some of them listed up here, but there are other things like admins or discussions or outcomes, modules, things like that, all different types of objects. And it's even richer than that because each of these APIs contains a lot of different operations inside them. So for the courses API, for example, you might have things like get detail on a course, get all the users in a course, delete the course, edit the course. So 74 APIs times many operations inside each API means there's this really vast array of activity that you can perform based on what you can imagine you want to do with Canvas. All right, so we had a little bit of animation here that we're not picking up, but now let's go get the data. Right, so the volume of data that we need is pretty large, but the complexity of the logic that we use to get the data is pretty simple. So 74 APIs times all these operations inside of each API. In total, our logic uses 5 operations to go get all the data to drive this kind of advising system. So we start off with the courses. Given the active enrollment term, we go out and we pass in our enrollment term ID from our student information system. We get the list of courses that we want to drive information from. And then for each course, we loop through and we do a couple of things. One is we get the users where the enrollment type is student. So for this purpose, we're not concerned about the users who are instructors or TAs or observers. We just want the students. We get the assignments, and we're looking for things like, what's the due date on the assignment? What's the description of the assignment? How many points is it worth? Is the assignment published or muted? The fourth one up here is the one that really pulls everything together. So given courses, students, and assignments, let's go get all that fact information, all the assignment and quiz and exam submissions. So one point about this, the submissions API is that is not just for assignments. That's all the work that the student is submitting. So we're going to look at that student submission API in a little bit more detail on the next slide. But the last one we get, as Steve mentioned, we look at the event data, the participation, how often is the student engaged in the online presence of the course. And so we're going to go get, for each course and student combination, we're going to get the event information. How many page views did that student log? So again, the complexity is simple, but the volume of the data is pretty large. So let's look at that sort of critical API call for us. Let's see. So first point is that this is private student data, so it needs to be secured. This operates on HTTPS and OAuth for those who are technically oriented. We're going to pass in a course number. We're going to get student submissions. We want all students. So like I say, there's a lot of data. One course in particular, we have 2,000 students, about 65 assignments. That means there are 130,000 data points just for that one course. Now, that's an outlier, but it's still, there are many, many round trips to the server. So we try to limit the number of trips that we go, limit the number of requests that we make. So we're going to get all students at once instead of going back once for each student. We do want the submission comments. As you saw a couple slides ago, the advisors use that to have conversation with the students. The APIs by default return 10 data points per page. Again, limiting the number of round trips, we want to get 100 at a time. 100 is the maximum that the API will allow, so we just want to get as much as we can at once. The response comes back in a form called JSON, JavaScript Object Notation. It's relatively human readable, so if you go through here, you can see things like when was it graded, what's the workflow state, what are the comments that were made. Right, so you can see some of that information. This gives you a sense of what an API will return in terms of a response. So the APIs are great, right? We use them a lot, but they are not the answer to everything. So APIs are great when you've got small exchanges of data. They're great because they're real time. They are good for doing things on the fly. But the kinds of things that we're doing where we're bulk transferring data, so one thing that I did not mention is that we're doing an extraction of data every single night. Actually, I missed, let me go back one slide. So one thing that I did not like about this API that we would really like to see an improvement on is that each night we go get this data, there is not a way to tell this API that I want the data that's changed or added since yesterday. What we get is just the whole thing. And so that means to us that we have to dump everything that we pulled yesterday and go back and collect everything fresh. So that means the amount of time that we spend going through the APIs and the load on the servers on both ends is much higher. Seems like it'd be much more efficient to be able to say, show me the delta since yesterday or since 2 days ago. We've had some conversation with Instructure. They're in agreement in principle, but they've got a lot of other things that they're working on also, so we haven't seen that. But one thing that I do like that's not obvious is that you can actually work with these APIs just in a browser window. So you don't need an advanced development environment like a programmer would use. If you log into Canvas in one browser window, you open another tab and you put in a URL for an API, like what you have here, and just paste that into the address bar, you'll get a response that looks like this. So you can have business analysts, you can have functional people that are experimenting with the APIs and exploring without having to navigate the security bits of it, because the browser handles that when you're already logged in, and without having to work with advanced tools. So we had a couple people who were on the functional side who were working with this, figuring out when we do certain things in Canvas in the user interface, what does the response look like in the API, before we ever got programmers involved. Thing that I do really like about it. So coming back here, so the APIs are great for some relationships. There is a hosted data solution that Instructure is talking a lot about this weekend, or this week. We are an alpha partner and also a beta partner in this, so we've been experimenting with the hosted data. It includes most of what we're looking for, so it looks pretty promising to us. And trying to figure out where that fits in. So we, right now, we spend about 2 hours every single day going to the APIs and collecting information. As we expand into 500 and 1,000 and potentially as many as 4,000 courses, that's cumbersome, that's too much. We're not going to be able to sustain that with APIs. Going out and doing a bulk transfer and ETL type load would be much more practical. But then the third option is Unizen is talking about a live event stream, whereas certain activities occur, a limited subset of activities occur in Canvas. It'll emit just a small message, hopefully in a caliper format, but it'll be emitting real time. So the downside of the hosted data, where you can get bulk data at once, is that that would be staged. That'll probably happen once a day, which means that anytime during the day, you're anywhere from 0 to 24 hours out of date. So that gives what we're doing on the technical side to try to collect the kind of data we need to merge Canvas with our Sakai data and present everything as a unified set of information to the Student Explorer application and to the advisors.
This guy, I think. Yes, can you still hear me? Or I'm in this guy. All right. So as you can see, it was a really fruitful partnership, and you can see because our lab has a lot of the subject matter expertise around analytics, and Glenn's team has a lot of the technical knowledge. So it was actually us discovering the Canvas analytics and the Canvas APIs together, which is really helpful, I think, in a lot of ways. So this is actually a nice example of how we can bring the technical side as well as kind of more the research side together in really cool partnerships. And that's now expanding. So in January, I got a large internal grant to kind of bring a lot of these kind of new emergent learning analytics tools together. So we have 2 other projects in addition to Student Explorer. One's called eCoach, the other one's called the Academic Reporting Toolkit at Michigan. And really the idea is to bring these kind of nascent tools together and really kind of bring them to scale together. How many people have ever heard of Digital Innovation Pipeline? Maybe? Maybe not. So pipelines don't necessarily work because a lot of these things have grown Scotch tape and duct tape. So the idea of a greenhouse is actually to bring them and push them to scale. So it's really within that environment. We have 3 brand new developers on within the greenhouse. They're also going to partner with ITS and work with Glenn's team as well. Really discovering we have an opportunity to maybe kind of rethink, now that we're moving towards Canvas, kind of going back, how does the hosted data or the Canvas data product fit in? How do we fit in real-time data? How do we maybe kind of re-explore things now with a Canvas voice and maybe fitting Sakai into that structure? And all those kind of myriad questions as we hopefully reach towards enterprise and institution-wide scale with these kind of tools. And kind of the last thing I want to leave you with is that ultimately, all this data and all the effort we're doing here is really about improving the student experience. And so advisors are a huge component of that. And this is a quote from one of our advisors, where it's really talking about removing the gray element. That there's a lot of fuzz we don't know about students. And the whole idea is that as we move from self-reported grades, tools like Student Explorer and other analytic tools really help to deepen the conversation with students. And really provide more context, whether that student is struggling or they're excelling and having the semester of their lives. How we can personalize and actually improve all student learning is really what the goal we're after. So thank you, and we'll hopefully have some time for questions now. Thanks. And I will, just real quick, I'll mention if you go on the page for this in the, I forget what it's called, the community, the Canvas community or whatever, I posted all the slides, but there's also a comment on there that has links to our data dictionary that drives Student Explorer, as well as I think 4 or 5 papers we've written about our research. Yeah?
Do you have any struggles with faculty buy-in? We have an early alert system on our campus, and faculty was really uncomfortable letting advisors or anyone else kind of see how their students were specifically doing in their course unless they opted in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and our problem is they don't want. I used to work as an advisor, so I
Yep.
kind of saw this come about. They didn't want our advisors seeing those grades and those interactions, but comfortable saying, hey, this student needs to be engaged more. Could you help this student out?
Yeah.
But was that ever a conversation when you were trying to get?
So the question was about faculty buy-in, just repeating it for folks online there or whatever. And really what we did is we started small. So we started with a group of only 3 advisors where they actually had a lot of touch points with individual faculty, particularly for those large introductory classes. But we're firm believers in our approach of reducing faculty burden as much. So a lot of our approach is saying, look, we want you, and we know that your students are driving you to keep your grades up to date. And what we're going to do is we're going to reduce that burden. So hopefully, we're going to get to a point where we're not going to ask you to fill out additional qualitative information or how is this student doing. The whole idea is you fill out your grades. This will flow in an appropriate way to academic advisors where they can have communications with students about this data. And ultimately, we want to get to a point where we're being very careful. We don't want to demotivate particularly students at the highest risk points, but eventually we want to get hopefully to a student-facing model of this as well. Yeah.
Is that really your email address, or is there a cheat?
No, that really is my email address.
Those are really our email addresses. So yeah, feel free to email us. There's our Twitter in the bottom right. Tweet at us. Yeah. So the question is about integration of the early warning system in Canvas. It is not directly integrated in Canvas because we are still operating in multiple learning management systems. What it is integrated is integrated into our advising file. So 2 of our largest undergraduate kind of populations on campus use what's called the LSNA advising file. It's also used by engineering. So this is where advisors do their daily work. So if I pull up a student and it says like, here's who you are, here's your major, here's kind of your course patterns, there's yet another Student Explorer. So I click on that, even though it's a different system, it kind of looks like it's all integrated. So then I'll pull up that same student I was looking at and show them how they're doing formatively in their classes right now. Yeah.
Is this just exposed to academic advisors, or is it also available to on-campus the on-campus counseling center?
So the question was, who is the Student Explorer actually available to right now? Right now, it's only available to select academic advisors. We are staging this out in process. Part of that is because it continues to be a design research experiment. And part of that is as we onboard different advising populations, they use the tool in different ways, and they have different needs. So we don't want to just say, oh, we have a great tool, let's open it up to everybody. So I think over time we do actually want to include more people into kind of the large umbrella of student support. So that includes not only counseling, it includes like can we actually open this up to people at the Science Learning Center, at the Writing Center, at the Language Resource Center, and think of more touch points, not just on like how students are doing in terms of early alert, but really that entire process. So if as an academic advisor advises a student to go to the Writing Center for help on their English, they can pull up the same file, say, how are you doing in English classes, and actually write notes. They'll go back to the academic advisor. So it gets to be more a holistic pattern, similar to like the student success plan that I think came up through Sinclair College. I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more, maybe.
So have you explored the solution in any depth yet?
I'm sorry, the what?
The Amazon Redshift solution?
I'll leave that to
Yeah,
Glenn.
so not sure this is on. Yeah, so the question was, have we explored the Amazon Redshift, the hosted data solution? So we have. We like I mentioned, we were an alpha partner, and we are now a beta partner. We're experimenting with our enterprise tools for extract, transform, load, ETL, and we've had pretty good success getting there. Given the volume of data that we're trying to pull out, conversation this year about, do we want to continue pulling all of that data down on premise every day? And we need to have some design discussions about that. But the hosted data does not include everything that you can interact with through the APIs, but it's got a decent subset, and it has most of what we're looking for our application. The one thing that really we're not, well, two things. One is the qualitative information, that's submission comment information. There is only a limited amount of that in the hosted data. The other thing is that we collect the information every day, but we do a snapshot every week. And that ability to do a snapshot so that it can be presented to the advisor how the student is tracking throughout the progress of the term is not available through the Redshift solution. But to us, when we go back to Michigan, one of the things we really need to do is have design discussions about APIs versus hosted data versus live stream.
I think we're at time, but Glenn and I will hang out for a few minutes in case you have more questions. Thank you very much.